And welcome back, geometry students. It's been a while since we've been together. Hope you guys are ready for our notes today. They are titled 7-1 Triangle Congruence Patterns. Hope you guys enjoyed everything we did with the fast food factory, working at Chick-fil-A or whatever fast food restaurant of your choice was, making the sandwiches, and hopefully you guys understood the purpose of that and your reports went well, and this should be somewhat of a review for you as we go through each triangle congruence pattern, which one works and which ones don't work. All right, the first one we know that works is the side, 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 or we abbreviate that SSS. Let me stop now and make sure that you know you're supposed to write all this stuff down and get it in your notes. Your notes should look exactly like my notes. All right, side, side, side is when we have three pairs of sides that are congruent. I've already marked two triangles with the three sides congruent. So I can then list those out and I can say that I know AB is congruent to DE. And then I also know that BC is congruent to EF. And lastly, I know that AC is congruent to DF. All right? So since I know that those three pairs of sides are congruent, now I know that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF by side, side, side. All right? The next one we have that we know is side angle side, abbreviated SAS. And I've got two triangles already marked for you as well. And on these triangles, notice that they're not facing the same direction. They're facing a different direction. That's going to become important whenever we list out the congruent pieces. All right, so SAS is when we have two sides and an included angle. I said the angle is included in between two sides. Notice it's SAS. That's how I know I need to do the SAS property. All right, so list out what we have. I have side AB is congruent to side DE. Now, it would be appropriate, it would be correct if we said side ED here, but I want to go the same direction. I go from AB here, so go DE there. So AB is congruent to DE. Next, I have that angle B is congruent to angle E. And then lastly, I have that side BC is congruent to side EF. Again, making sure I go the same direction just to make it correct. All right? So with that, since I have a side, an angle, and a side congruent, and they're in that order going around the triangle, now I know that these two triangles are congruent. So let me make my congruent statement then. I know that triangle, let me start at a different point just for purpose sake. If I start, say, triangle BCA is congruent to this other triangle over here. See if you can make the congruent statement correct. It needs to go in the exact same order. So if I start here at B, I need to start over here at E. And if I go BCA, I'll need to say EFD. So triangle EFD right there. All right, those triangles are congruent by SAS, the SAS property. All right, and the next one we know, we have angle side angle, abbreviated ASA. And notice my two triangles here are squished together. And take a look at what we already have marked. Okay, draw these out. I've got up here, these two angles are marked congruent. They have one arc on each side. And then down here I have a right angle. If I have a right angle on a side with a line, that means that those lines are perpendicular to each other. If one side has a right angle, that also means that this other side is a right angle. So I can mark that as well. Okay, so I have an angle here, then I have two angles here. Well, where's that side that's congruent? What's the side that's right there that's the same on both triangles? So I'm also going to mark that just for my own purpose to know that those are congruent. Okay, so I need to list out what is congruent here. I have an angle, then a side, and an angle, so I'm going to start up here. I cannot just say angle B because there's two angles there, so I have to name it by its more proper name. I'm on the right-hand side here. If I go from C to B to D, this is angle CBD is congruent to, over here, angle ABD. All right, I already know that this side, like I said, is the exact same on both triangles, so BD is going to be congruent to BD. And I know that, just a side note here, this is whenever the triangle piece is the exact same on both, it's the reflexive property. Put that in parentheses. Reflexive property. I'll abbreviate it prop. All right, that's going to come in handy a little later. And then down there at the bottom, I know that the angle at D is a right angle. If I have two right angles, they're obviously going to be congruent to each other. And I have to name them correctly. So I'm going to say angle CDB is congruent to angle ADB. All right, and now since I have here, see how I wrote this down? I wrote it as I saw it around the triangle. I've got an angle, I've got a side and another angle, so therefore I can do my angle side angle property. So let's list the triangles that are congruent. Over here I have triangle ABD. So triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD by the ASA property. All right, next one, angle side. Again, you can see I've got two triangles here listed, but I don't yet have an angle and a side marked congruent. But what do I know about these triangles? Here at C, I have angles that are across each other. What are those kind of angles called? You tell yourself. Say self, what are those angles? Well, I told myself that those are vertical angles. I know vertical angles are congruent, so therefore I could mark those as well. Okay? So I can go through and list each one. Angle side. They're at C, so I've got angle BCA is congruent to angle DCE. All right. This angle over here, I can just call it angle A. I could call it angle CAB, but since it's the only angle there, I'm going to keep it easy. Angle A is congruent to angle E. And lastly, side AB is congruent to side ED. All right. So since I have that, I want you guys to write the congruent statement. Pause the video, write the congruent statement, then come back and see if you can get it correct. I'm going to say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle EDB because when I had this, I had side, then I had an angle, then a side, so angle, side. All right, and my last pattern, I have hypotenuse leg, which stands for HL. Now, one thing that's very, very, very important, we put a star by it here. This must be in a right triangle. If you don't have a right triangle, you can't use HL for the congruence pattern. But just because you have a right triangle doesn't automatically make it HL. Look back up here what I had for ASA. That was a right triangle, but I used ASA for the pattern. So just because it's a right triangle doesn't mean it's HL, but it has to be a right triangle in order to be HL. Okay? So HL stands for hypotenuse leg. Here I have my hypotenuse congruent, AB and DE, and then I've got a leg marked congruent, CB and FE. So since I have a hypotenuse leg congruent, I know this will be the HL. So AB is congruent to DE, and then I've got side BC is congruent to side EF, and lastly, yes, I have right angles, so angle C and angle F are right angles. So therefore I can say these two triangles are congruent. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF by HL. Now, here's your kicker. All right, you ready for this? If I'm going through this triangle and I'm listing the sides, notice I have this side here is a side, this is a side, and this is an angle. What does that spell? Okay, that's a bad word. Well, that one doesn't work. As we saw in the fast food factory, you should have written in your report that the SSA, okay, spell it backwards, the SSA doesn't work for triangle congruence. So don't get these triangles and say, oh, these are congruent by SSA. No, they're congruent because we have a right triangle and the hypotenuse and the leg are marked congruent. So I also want to write that down here at the bottom. SSA, it does not work for triangle congruence. The other one that doesn't work for triangle congruence is AAA. Does not work for triangle congruence. Those two don't work. So the way we can remember these is, you ready for this? Butts and batteries don't work for triangle congruence. Okay? Yes, it's geometry, a little risque, okay? But those two things don't work for triangle congruence. Hopefully remember, the butts and the batteries don't work. Make sure you bring this to class tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.